This is the Be One Change One podcast, where our mission is to help listeners define values, practice integrity, and inspire change.
Our vision is to mentor men and empower them to achieve more by taking responsibility for shaping their own lives.
He's CAS, an evolving man who has been shaped by adversity and continues to grow through his imperfections.
And he's Roscoe, an imperfect work in progress that tries to suck less every day.
Between us, we have over 40 years of Air Force fighter pilot experience with countless hours as trainers, instructors, and mentors.
Join us and learn to take responsibility for your own life as we dive into subjects from leadership to resilience to vulnerability.
Be the one who changes their course. Be decisive, driven, and purposeful. Set the example for others. Lead. We wish we'd had this show when we were younger men.
Be the one.
Got it.
All right, brother. Well, welcome back, ones, to the next episode of the Be One Change One podcast. Today, Roscoe and I were going to talk about the idea of growth through imperfection, or how to learn from fucking shit up is another way to say it. But a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about, I don't know what notes you have, Roscoe, but a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about, I'll just make a blanket statement up front, is it comes from a lot of Brene Brown's work. She wrote a book called The Gifts of Imperfection. She talks about, like 10 guideposts and then kind of what it all boils down to. But I just thought it would be worth, we talk a lot about, how failure's our greatest teacher and not to be afraid of failure and all that stuff. But there's a lot of things that go into that, right? Like it's always a little more nuanced and a little more complicated than that. And there's a lot of other skills maybe that we might need to develop in order to get, the courage to do some of those things. And so I thought it would be a good opportunity just to talk about some of that stuff and get your take and your thoughts on it as well. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, dude, I don't think that's too dissimilar from the way that we've framed things in the past a little bit. And I know we've kind of beat around this bush a little bit, and it seems to be kind of that season of maybe going back on some of the earlier episodes and breaking them out just a little bit further, maybe a little bit more detail. Because, hey, you know what, dude? In the course of this 110 episodes that we've done, I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
Just reading different articles and listening to you and some of the things that you bring up and some of the things that our guests bring up. I mean, I've learned, and I know my aperture is opened a little bit. So it'll be neat to see where this one goes. And then, just kind of to piggyback on what you said about Brene Brown, just realize that that's one source, and there's probably, 1,000 others out there. And that'll be, we'll take ours from Brene's work and we'll break it out. And I got some stuff pulled up on the Google machine over here, and we'll see where they cross and where they differ. And let's go for it, man. What do you got?
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, I mean, I think the one thing, we haven't talked about this particular topic in a bit, I don't think, but, I think, especially in today's world, like, we talk all the time about social media and, there's this, especially for the younger generations, they're faced with like people that are always in their perfect, outfit and making gains or whatever, right? It's like this, there's this image of perfection that's constantly broadcast to us. Like, and if you're not careful, that can lead to comparison. And we've talked about the issues with comparison, and, that can lead you to think that you should be at the same place that other people are at. If any of that stuff on social media is even true, which I doubt that most of it is. But my point is that our culture and our society kind of tends to drive people to believe that there's like this perfection that you can achieve and that imperfection is a bad thing, when the reality is that we're all imperfect, right? And we all have things that we need to work on, and we all have things that are imperfect about us, and that's okay, right? And so, but I think in order to recognize that, right, that takes a certain amount of vulnerability. In order to embrace your own imperfections, that requires a certain amount of vulnerability. One, on just your own side of things, to recognize and go, yep, that's something that maybe I'm not very good at, or, where my strength and weaknesses lie. And to reframe that vulnerability is not weakness. I think it's demonstrated. Society and culture, I think, pushes a lot that if you're vulnerable, then you're weak, right? I know that that's the messaging I got growing up as a young boy, into being a man, was, you can't show any weakness, you can't show any vulnerability, right? Because the two are synonymous with each other, but they're really not, right? Vulnerability is actually courage. And it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable, and to recognize that you have imperfections, and to go to task on self-inspection, and to build some resiliency tools, and to share those things with people that are close to you. Like that's actually real courage. So I guess I'd start there, with just a lot of this is going to be self-inspection, but also just fighting that misperception that, and fighting that desire to be perfect. Perfection doesn't exist, right? We can strive to be really good. We can strive to try to get to perfect, but like you're gonna come up short. And like you say all the time, you may go out on your 6-week exercise program with a plan to lose 10 pounds. Well, and if you only lose 8 pounds, dude, you still did pretty good, right? And like Dr. John said, hey man, if I'm hitting it 80% of the time, like I'm still moving the ball, right? I'm still doing all right. So I think I just want to reframe that for a second for everybody that's listening. Thoughts?
Yeah, there's I think there's a good line in there too about perfection, and I don't really see the harm in aiming for perfection and wanting to strive to be perfect. And I used to tell my football players this, like, we're going to strive to be perfect, but we're going to accept excellence along the way. If we can, if we can hit it in the 90 percentile, then I think we're doing pretty darn good, man. And, go back to when you were in school and taking tests and everything, you tried to make 100 on everything. But if you made a 95, that's still pretty damn good, and so you go into it, and I think that comes back to mindset. I think it all comes back to the way that you frame things between your ears, right? And it is a delicate balance, I believe, between striving for perfection and being a perfectionist. I don't know if those two things are the same, and
I
I'd
don't
be
think they
interested
are.
if we could get Doc John to try to break that down for us, and just by virtue of definition, are those things different? And I believe they are. And I think that if I'm striving for perfection, like, in my writing and stuff, I try to make it fucking perfect, man. But I know, like, in the back of my mind, I know it's never going to be perfect. There's always something I can change. There's always a different adjective that I could use to describe X, or a metaphor that I could throw in there or something. And and that kind of gets into things like, now you have to break that down into subjectivity and objectivity. And um, if you're trying to pass your test at the DMV, that's an objective test of your knowledge, versus if you're a sculptor and you're trying to sell something, well, that's subjective. And so then you have this nice dichotomy between those two. But striving for perfection, I don't think is a necessarily bad thing, as long as you don't compare yourself to a lot of other people and beat yourself up for it when you make a 95 instead of 100.
Yeah, I think that's the key, right? Is that you're generous enough with yourself that if you don't make that 100%, it's not the end of the world, right? And it doesn't send you into some kind of a shame spiral, or make you think that you're not capable of. The problem with the idea of achieving perfection to a certain extent is that if somebody always thinks that they have to be perfect, and it does come back to mindset, I agree with you there. But if you have this expectation that you have to be perfect in everything you do, well, that's an impossibility. And eventually what that's going to lead to you doing is moving away from things that may be challenging, or moving away from things that may not suit your strengths, but maybe are more prone to your weaknesses, because you're afraid that that's going to somehow expose you as imperfect, right? And that's not where we want to be, right? We don't want to skirt from challenge, because we don't want to be exposed, because we've tried to build this facade up to people around us at work or in our social circle or whatever, that we're perfect, right? We all stumble and fall. We all have our shortcomings. And sometimes you have to embrace those things, right? Sometimes that's the thing. Those are the pieces that, if you want to be truly authentic with yourself, you have to embrace those aspects of yourself and kind of go to task on it a little bit. There's nothing wrong with trying to achieve the perfect score, or trying to, execute something. We did that every day. Every day we'd go out and fly, and you're trying to fly the perfect sortie. I don't think we ever did it once. As a rule of thumb, there was probably always something that we could point out that we could have done better on any phase of the sortie. But that's the goal, right? That's what you're striving towards. And the importance of that is that gets you better. That forces you to get into that mindset of refining and honing skills and becoming better and learning in the process, right? And so that's kind of the point that I'm making with this idea of perfection, is if it becomes something that becomes a stymie to you, or it makes you turn away from challenge because you're worried that you might be exposed somehow for being imperfect, well, that's not where we want to be, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, dude. Now, I'll kind of piggyback on one thing that you just said about, the way that we did things growing up in our world. When we would go out for a mission, we always had objectives that were scoreable, and we could come back and we could put a yes or a no on it, like 100% blue survival. Kill all the bad guys, destroy all the 100% target destruction, and then we come back and we debrief it and go, did we hit all the targets inside of the TOT, the time on target window? And if the answer is yes, you put a green check mark. If the answer is no, you put a red X and you move on. And so those were objectives that we could come back and score our perfection against in a grand sense, right? Now, let's say that we came back to the board and all the blue players survived, all the red players died, and all the targets got hit inside of the window. All right. That's all green check marks on the board. But that doesn't mean that we flew our jets perfectly and that we executed the tactic perfectly. Maybe we got lucky.
Right.
Maybe shit just worked out. Maybe we called smart audibles along the way and we cut a corner here or there to make the timing. And so those are the things that we would debrief down to the minutia. Even though our objectives said we were perfect, the execution to get there was slightly imperfect. And I think that's a beautiful way to frame how you can have. I encourage everyone to set goals and make them gradable and scoreable. And it's a yes or no answer, black and white, 100% or not, period. And then you either put a green check by it or a red X by it. If you get a green check mark by it, does that mean that your execution was perfect? Not necessarily. It means that the result was what you wanted. That's good, right? That's what you set out to do. But there's probably a way that you can make that better for the next iteration. And I think that's really the root of what we're going to get down into in the next 50 minutes or so when we talk about growth through imperfection. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to screw things up along the way. Even though we might make our goal, we might reach the goal, but we can still debrief it and we can still learn something from it. Because, dudes, if you get into this, like this, I don't know, this path of stasis where you're like, well, things are going pretty good, right? I'm doing good. I've met my goals. I've got green check marks on everything. Things are good. Eventually that's going to break down because things outside of your control are going to change. Right. And you can take your workout plan, for example, CAS. You're training up for marathons and half marathons. That's awesome. If you did the same thing every single day, you would not decrease your time. You might maintain the same, but guess what's going to change? Yeah. The weather's going to change, right? Your circadian rhythm might change based on work, and you have little control over a couple of those things, right? The seasonal cycles that we have here in Phoenix, you might not be able to get up and go for a 10-mile run outside before it reaches 100 degrees. Yeah. It's very difficult to go exercise outside, which I love, and instead you have to change some stuff, and that's part of that growth process.
Yeah, well, and what I would say to that, Roscoe, is like, in a perfect example, if you want to talk about like me and my own exercise program. So like today, when I got in on this overnight, I went to the gym and I have more energy in the morning. I've been up since 4:00 this morning. I get on the treadmill. I have this plan in my mind of what I'm going to do, and I start running, dude. And I'm just my nutrition's not great on the road. I'm probably not fueled really well to do what I wanted to do. And so I had to shift. And kind of tailor it back so I could still get the miles in that I wanted to get, but maybe not crush myself so hard in the process. And I think the underlying theme of all that is at some point you've got to cultivate a little bit of self-compassion in the sense of recognizing that you don't need to be flawless all the time. Like you're not going to hit on all cylinders all the time. And we've seen it in the fighter squadrons, right? When you got guys going through upgrades, if they're super critical of themselves, if they have this idea in their mind that they have to be flawless on every sortie and they start busting rides, and then that really starts to affect their mentality, right? Because they start to beat themselves up and they start to get down and they start to think that they're not capable of actually learning or executing this, right? Whereas somebody who maybe has a little more self-compassion goes, yeah, dude, I fucked that up today, but here's all the things I took away from it. I'm gonna apply those to tasks next time, and I'm expecting a better result. Like, my expectation is still high. My expectation is still that I'm gonna be able to achieve the result I want at some point. I just didn't hit it today, and so treating yourself with a little bit of kindness.
Well, there's
A good example. Go ahead.
the only thing I was going to throw in there was your example was really good about the way that we used to fly, and how often did you have a student, like, on a check ride or on a BFM sortie, it really didn't matter, but a BFM, he busts the floor in the first set, and then from there on, the rest of his sets are dog shit because he knew he screwed up. He got a TR violation on the first set. He got yelled at over the
Yep.
radio by his IP. Don't do that shit no more. And his mindset went
Yep.
to, instead of focusing on the things he needed to do right, he started focusing on all the shit that he might do wrong. And that's a
That's
very
right.
different mindset. Right. And
Yeah.
Nick Saban,
Yep.
Nick Saban used to talk about this in the way that he used to coach about mindset. And he goes, look, we're not going to practice to get it right. We're going to practice so many times that we can't get it wrong. And that's a very different mindset to have.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is. And that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like, just getting to a place where you can give yourself a little bit of kindness, understanding, and acceptance, especially when you're making mistakes or facing challenges, because those are difficult things to work through. And one of the ways that Brene talks about it that I think is really good is, here's a perfect example, right? Francis and I talk a lot. We're getting ready to run a half marathon in about a month. He's training for it. I'm training for it. And he's down on himself, man. And one of the reasons that he's down on himself is because it is very difficult right now to work on mileage outside in Phoenix, Arizona. Like, it's just the worst time of year to have to prep, And so your option is, if you're not going to run outside, go run on a treadmill for an hour to an hour and a half. And that's not fun either, right? And so,
Boring.
he's doing the work, but he gets frustrated because he just feels like, like he just doesn't feel like he's seeing the improvement and all of that stuff. And he gets down on himself. And then I come along and I'm like, dude, look, you're doing great. Just get the mileage in. Like, part of the problem with training when you're training for the first time is you feel tired all the time because you're running a lot, right? And what you don't realize until you run your first race is when you do that taper week and you go into the race and you have barely put any miles on your body, even though that week feels like you're doing everything wrong because you don't feel like you're still training. Dude, your body's so fresh for race day and you have so much more energy because you haven't been beating the shit out of yourself for the last 4 or 5 days, that, like, you feel really good and you feel really prepared and you perform really well, right? Because you've done the work to put in the endurance to be able to run that distance. And so what I use that example to just say, treat yourself like you would treat your friend. If your friend came to you and was like, dude, I suck, and oh my God, like, what would you say to your friend? Well, say that to yourself, right? Give yourself a little bit of grace.
Well, there it is. You just said the $5 word right there, is the little bit of grace. And I am my own worst critic, and I hate myself most of the time when I'm doing shit like this. And it's those characters, man, the Stan and the Jack on your little shoulder talking to you. And Stan is going to say some evil, fucked up shit to you, and he's going to make you feel like a piece of shit. And he's going to make you feel like, instead of going out and trying to get, I read this thing the other day, man, where it said, it's one of these motivational pages that I follow on Instagram or something. And man, it's just really good, positive. It's always positive stuff. And I got a couple of friends that really need to hear that kind of shit. And so I'll screenshot it, I'll send it over to them, and just it's kind of twofold. It's one, to remind them that, hey man, you can do this, and two, it's to remind them that you got somebody in your corner thinking about you, right? And if you need to reach out, you can call me, and I don't expect anything in return. I send it over to them and move on with my day. But this thing that it said was, he says, hey man, if you wake, and this is like what you experienced maybe today, if you wake up and all you're capable of is 50%, and you go to the gym or you go outside or you go to work and you give 50%, guess what? You gave 100% that day.
Yeah, you did, right? You did the best you could.
Yeah. I mean, if you gave 50% and all you were capable of was 50%, well, that's 100%. And that's a really neat way. Right. That's just a neat way to put a positive spin on, I feel like shit, I don't want to do anything. Maybe I'm just going through the motions today. But dude, you did it.
Yeah.
You went through the motions. And that's, compliment yourself on that. Take pride in that.
Yeah.
I know I have those days, probably about one a week, where I just don't feel like it. I don't want to. Damn it, it's hot outside. It's been really humid lately. And man, I don't want to. It's not that I feel bad. It's not that I overate for lunch and now I feel like a fat ass that can't run or whatever. It's just I just don't want to go. I'd rather sit in here in the air conditioner and read a book.
Yeah.
But I did. I strapped my shoes on and I went outside and I got something out of it. And
yeah.
I think that I'm my own worst critic a lot of times. This is something that I should probably work on. Next week's episode that's going to come out with Bruce, we kind of hit on this about, enjoy the win, enjoy the dub, enjoy the victory, enjoy the accomplishment that you made. And I'm really terrible at doing that.
Yeah, I am too. And when I look back on my younger years now, I wish I would have been a little more cognizant of that, and I would have been a little more present in those moments to really enjoy them for what they were, instead of always being so future focused and looking for the next hill to climb, the next thing to do type of thing. So that's a great point, dude. And this whole idea too of authenticity and self-compassion, I think ties good. Well, this whole idea of self-compassion, I think, ties really well into what we were hitting on at the beginning with authenticity and trying to cultivate authenticity in your own life. And the first piece of that is letting go of what other people think. And we've talked about this on the podcast a bunch, right? Like, don't worry about the comparison game. Don't worry about the hecklers in the stands when you're in the arena. You got to let go of what people think. And don't try not to conform to those external expectations, or try not to do things because you're seeking validation from other people. Do things because it's your goal. Do things because it's where you want to go, or what you want to do, or who you want to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does, man. And Katie got me this cool book for my birthday. It's by Cameron Hanes. Have you ever heard of Cameron Hanes?
I don't think so.
Cameron Hanes is like he's an ultra marathoner, and he's real big into bow hunting and doing all these really high level endurance type competitions. But the title of the book is Undeniable: How to Reach the Top and Stay There with Cameron Hanes. And it's a really good read thus far, but there's some really good stuff in here. And on this page, it says, be better in the 10th day. Determination is not a desire, it's a destination. And I just love the way that he puts it in almost like idiot terms that Roscoe can understand. And he starts going down about how, well, and he simplifies it. And the point is, man, is this shit isn't cosmic, and you don't have to read PhD level stuff to be able to get down to the nuts and bolts in this crap, man. You can go watch a stupid YouTube video that might be a cartoon. No, that doesn't mean that it's easy. No, but you don't need a PhD to understand it. And I think what we really, what it all comes down to in the end is you have to just change the way that you talk to yourself a little bit. And you have to change the way that you view and hold yourself accountable. And holding yourself accountable does not mean treating yourself like shit because you missed a workout. It means learning from that and figuring out, why did you miss the workout? Did you miss the workout because you just didn't want to go and you gave in to Stan? Or did you miss the workout because, work got away from you and then the fucking sink blew up in the house and you had to fix it? Life happens, right?
Yeah.
So debriefing that and learning from that, and when you get down to the why did I miss this event, why did I screw this up, and you find the root cause of it, then you take a look at the next day and you go, okay, well, let's say this happens again. What can I do to my daily battle rhythm to change something so that now I can work that in if something goes wrong, when something goes wrong? When I have a longer layover in the airport that I wasn't anticipating and I get to my hotel room and feel like shit. Or when I didn't drink enough water, well, the fix for that is easy. Start drinking water earlier in the day, right? So there's all this learning that goes along the way that you don't need a PhD to figure out.
No, that's very true. But at the end of the day, I think those are the places to start, right? Is a little bit of self-compassion, and then starting to cultivate a little bit of authenticity. But that dovetails nicely into what I think is kind of the next key ingredient, which is cultivating resiliency. You got to learn some resiliency skills. You got to learn how to be resilient in life, right? And Brene talks specifically about how does she put it? She says, letting go of numbing and powerlessness. So, a couple of great examples here. What's numbing? Well, dude, how you and I have lost friends who lost their ability to be resilient at times, and turn to alcohol or other things, to numb themselves from dealing with some really negative emotions and some really negative events that they were having in their life. Because if we're honest about it, that shit's really hard, and it's really hard to turn and to face that stuff and to go to task on it and to figure out what went wrong and what role you had to play in it, and maybe some of the things that you need to change about yourself. I know too, like going through my divorce, right? There were times in that process where I felt powerless. Like I was like, well, what the fuck is any of this worth or for, right? But I wasn't powerless, right? I still had the ability to make my own choices. I still had the ability to influence myself in the direction that I wanted to go. It may look different than what I thought things were going to look like because I was going through that process, but I still had control over me, right? I still had control in the choices that I made and the decisions I made, how I chose to show up in the relationships to the people that were important to me, and to prevent myself from kind of just going into that downward slide that I could have very easily gone into. And so I just would encourage listeners that if you've got to actively choose to engage with difficult emotions and experiences, like you have to work through those things. Because if you avoid them or suppress them, you're not dealing with the issue, right? And you may get away with it for a little bit of time, but eventually, if you've got a cup and you start filling that cup up because you're not dealing with shit, well, at some point, it's all going to boil over, right? The water's going to start running out the top of it. And when that happens, it's usually a shit show. And completely preventable if you would have just fucking dealt with this shit to begin with. So, resiliency is super important. Thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I have a lot. I think we've done a really good job of defining what resiliency is and why it's important. The question then becomes like, well, how do you do it? Right. Let's talk about the how a little bit. Like what does it really mean to have resiliency, or how do I bounce back from all these challenges? Well, I mean, you can start by finding out what went wrong, finding out why you're feeling the way that you are. And you said something earlier where you were talking about when we were talking about perfection and being a perfectionist and how it can lead to shameful behavior. And I think I'm probably guilty of that a few times, even recently, maybe, about where maybe I didn't live up to my own expectations, and then I felt really bad about it. It kind of felt like I was a failure for it. But then when I started debriefing it, and I realized that, gosh, if I would have just changed this one thing, I could have won, and I probably could have won hard, and maybe it comes back to mindset, maybe it comes back to the process that you use or whatever. But in the end, resiliency is the bouncing back from a challenge or a setback or whatever it is. How do you do it? Well, debrief and find out what went wrong, and then look for an objective answer, not like subjectivity, not like, well, what do I feel? Like, what is the problem? And then start to solve it from there. And if you can't do that yourself, then you got to talk to somebody else. You got to call in some experts or a friend or whatever. Yeah. And going back to what you were saying about the friends that we lost in the last couple of years, that's sort of where they failed. I think that they knew where the train was going off the tracks, because all of them were very intelligent individuals. And I think that they knew what the root cause was. But what they didn't do is they didn't reach out for help.
Well, they didn't. And part of that is probably what we've been talking about, this idea that maybe, they were in their own mind thinking that they had to uphold this perfect image and didn't want that to be tarnished by reaching out to a friend and going, dude, this is what's going on in my life and I need some help, right? Right? Shame lives in secrecy. And so maybe they had a lot of shame around the individual struggles that they were having with alcohol or whatever. And rather than be vulnerable and face that and then be honest with somebody about it to get some help, they just kept it secret, right? Until it got to the point where it was overwhelming and too much, right? So, and that's important because the bottom line is, dude, you've got to acknowledge your vulnerabilities and fears. And then that's resiliency, right? Acknowledge those things exist and then approach them head on, right? And start to go through it. Just like you're saying, we've talked about this on another podcast. We have a whole podcast on resiliency and building resiliency skills. And the key to resiliency isn't just coming through whatever the issue was, but it's coming through better off, right? It's coming through having done the self-inspection, having looked at the things that went wrong, what your role was in it, the things you may need to fix or work on for yourself, and then working on those things and being a better product on the other side. You know, the folks that find themselves in those loops of, why do I always end up in a relationship like this? Why do I always end up? Well, because, dude, you may power through it with Jack and Coke or, you know, champagne and cocaine, but if you don't have that self-evaluation process, if you don't actually face those vulnerabilities and then go to task on what went wrong and how to improve yourself for the next time, or why you've been in this loop and the choices that you've made, you're just gonna repeat that cycle, right? Life is gonna continue to kick you in the fucking nuts until you figure it out. So that's kind of where I'm getting at around adversity. And what you'll find when you start to do that stuff is that you build the capacity over time to start to meet challenges head on with a higher frequency, right? And you learn from those things and you go, yeah, dude, I've been through this before. We'll figure it out, right? And then you can bounce back from setbacks and you can adapt a little bit to some of the challenges that life is constantly throwing at you. You get better at it. It's like any other skill.
Yeah. And, let's not skip over, we've the examples that we've used thus far has been somebody who maybe is carrying around some shame, and that where, you were talking about substandard relationships. Why do I keep getting mixed up with the wrong person or whatever? That's probably a low self-esteem thing, and you accept mediocrity, or you accept being treated like shit because of your own low self-esteem. But pride can also bring on a lot of this too. And
Absolutely.
I know I've witnessed, and I'm trying to think if I have made a really shitty decision out of pride. I know I probably have, but I'm drawing a blank. I know some friends, it's always easier to judge others, right? And see where other people fucked up rather than point the finger back at yourself and show my own, inadequacies in a lot of ways. But I do know I have some anecdotal evidence and observed evidence from other people making shitty decisions out of pride. And, the second, third order effects of that, once they play out, and then they want to bitch about it. And I'm sitting here going, dude, like, you did this to yourself. And that's not to take away. I'm not trying to tell the person who's carrying around a lot of shame for whatever reason, like, fucking suck it up and get over it. You did this to yourself. That's not the same thing. The prideful thing is you're making decisions based on the wrong thing. You're making decisions based on your ego and how somebody might have hurt your feelings, versus, making an objective, rational decision about what's best. And you might have to swallow some of that pride.
Well, pride and ego too, in that same sense, can make you make poor decisions because you've convinced yourself that there's a certain perception that you want to project to the world about who you are and what you're about. And that could be criticized or attacked at times, or if you fall short of maintaining that perception and the cracks start to show, you can see those people go wild dingo too, right? So, I mean, pride plays a huge role and ego plays a huge role, and you've got to set all that aside. There's a big piece of humility in all of this, right? And for a lot of people, it's just that recognition that I'm not a perfect person, that I do have things that I need to work on. And that's okay. Like, we all are. We all have issues. We all have things that we need to work through. So,
that was the title of Dr. Phil's last book. We all have issues.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's that courage over comfort piece too, right, man? Like, this episode that's coming out next week with Bruce, we had a great discussion with him around, at some point in your life, you have to recognize that you have to be comfortable in the discomfort, right? And that's really what this is getting at. And I think for men in particular, man, we're not really good necessarily. If you didn't have parents that taught you skills when you were younger, or if you had a father like mine who taught you none at all, and it was like suck it up, buttercup, move on to the next thing, right? You may not even have, what the examples that you've had in your life and the things that you've learned over time, you may not even have the skills to do some of this, right? Because you've just been taught, up, just forget it, push through, compartmentalize, and go, right? And that works. That works for a time. But eventually, these things, especially if they're big things, will catch up with you. So, and we got to stop numbing with alcohol and drugs and porn or whatever it is, whatever addiction that you have that you're using to get that dopamine hit so that you don't have to think about or deal with the shit that's in front of you. You need to cut it off and you need to just fucking deal with it, right? You need to face these things, these challenges, and you need to go to task. You need to go to work. That's the only way we improve.
Yeah, can I take a tributary off just for a second and talk about parenting? Because some of this, not all of it, but some of it definitely stems from parents coddling kids. And I'm not pointing the finger at anyone. I will say this, that I think that all of my kids will tell you that I always encourage them to solve their own problems. I don't remember ever calling a teacher and having it out with them over a grade that my kid got or trying to extend a homework assignment. In fact, oftentimes it was opposite. If a teacher called me, we'd be like, no, that's his problem. He can figure that out. He did this to him. If he didn't do his homework, that's on him, and it's not my job to get my kid a good grade because he didn't give the effort. An example is my oldest son is diabetic. He was diagnosed as diabetic when he was 8, 9 years old, something like that. And gets on up into high school. He's got shitty grades. I think it was his junior year, he ended up with some shitty grades. And the baseball coach called me on the phone one afternoon and says, hey, homeboy's a really good athlete. We really want him to play on the baseball team, but he doesn't have the grades. Can you write a letter to the principal or to the school board or whomever, saying that, he's got diabetes, and because he has diabetes, he can't concentrate and he can't make good grades? I said, no, I won't write that letter. He goes, oh, well, we really wanted to play. I was like, I don't give a fuck. You're asking me to compromise my integrity because he didn't make good grades? He didn't make good grades because he has diabetes. He made good grades because he didn't fucking study. And I know because I live with him, right? I know that he didn't do his homework. I know he wasn't in there studying. He's in there playing video games. Like, this is not my problem, right? And guess what? He didn't play baseball that year. But if you're the type of parent that, they call them the helicopter parent, the hovering parent, the parent who's always solving the child's problems, well, you're not helping him build resiliency. You're not helping him learn from failure. You're not letting him fall on his face and get bruised a little bit. And then you pick him up, you dust him off, you ground him for a couple of weeks, and you send him back out into the world. Right. And where's that really start to come out? It comes out once they get out of that shelter of the public school system and they get into real life, because real life is unforgiving. Bosses are unforgiving. It's all about the bottom line. And if you ain't cutting it, no parent is going to be able to call and write a letter for you because you have diabetes. You're just going to be fired.
Well, they may, but it's not going to work.
And that's the end of it. Well, yeah, I mean, you've heard the stories of parents showing up to job interviews for their kids and shit like that. And I can tell you, if I was their boss or I was the hiring manager, I would just laugh. I wouldn't even entertain it. I wouldn't even give you the interview. I'd just laugh and be like, what the fuck are you guys doing here? Let's go get some coffee because this ain't happening. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
So anyways, that was a sidebar, but in a lot of ways, you can trace some of this back to the way we raise our kids. You have to give the young people in your life, you have to give them a chance to fail every now and then. You have to let them learn from their mistakes and hold them accountable when they do. And ask my kids, and it was not always pretty. But now that they're young men, now that they're young adults, they're very capable of owning their mistakes, finding out what went wrong, going to the source and trying to fix it. And that is a skill that they developed years ago when I wouldn't write that stupid letter.
That's right, man. And you totally can, as a parent, teach your children resiliency skills and teach them that failure is our greatest teacher and how to learn from those things and how to approach obstacles in life and challenges. And and you're absolutely right. The parents that don't allow for that to happen for their kids, they're robbing their children of opportunities to learn those skills as they move into adult life. And unfortunately, for a lot of those kids, when they get to adult life and they've never had to worry about those things or deal with those things directly, when that rug gets pulled out from underneath them, it can be a pretty significant traumatic event. So, yeah, you owe it to your children as a parent to do those things, right? Just all the things that we talk about. You can teach your kids how to live an authentic life. How to cultivate resiliency, how to cultivate authenticity, through all the examples that we're talking about and that you just shared. So, absolutely, 100%.
Are you familiar with Rumspringa?
I've heard it, but it's not coming to mind.
Is Rumspringer, however it's pronounced. It is, in the Amish community, they grow up, they live a very, what I think by today's definition, it's probably a very strict upbringing. Very little creature comforts compared to modern society, very, very, very few creature comforts and amenities like we might have. And so the deal is, when the kids it's either when they graduate high school or when they reach 18, one of those milestones, they're basically essentially given a time block that says, go out into the world and experience whatever it is that you want to experience. If you want to go to Vegas and do hookers and cocaine, then go for it, man. You come back to us, no questions asked, dude. Go get it out of your system. Go experience the real world, because I think it does a couple things. One, it gives them perspective. Like, this is how the rest of the world operates. And I've been very isolated for my entire upbringing. And now I have some experience with how the rest of the world lives, right? And it invites them to make a choice, make a decision, make an informed decision of whether to stay with the Amish community or, go out and assimilate to modern society. And I was over in Scottsdale at this book signing the other day, and this lady had written a book about this. It's a crime thriller thingy. This gal goes out on Rumspringer and she ends up getting killed, and now the whole Amish community's like up in an uproar, and it's a fantastic storyline. But it got me thinking about how, that's not terribly dissimilar than what we're thinking about, or than we're talking about here. If you're the type of parent who solves all your kids' problems for them, and the first time that they're faced with a real life decision is when they're out on their own at 18 or 21 years old, well, how is that very much different? They're not equipped with the emotional regularity and the resiliency skills and the decision making skills to be able to do that on their own, just like that Amish gal that went off on Rumspringer.
Yeah. What else you got
on that? Or are we moving on?
Are you done? Sorry, I didn't know if I didn't know because of my Wi-Fi if there was like a pause that I was losing you for a second, or if you were done. Okay, my bad,
bro. You know me. I can just keep going, man. I'll just keep talking.
Yeah, I know, brother. The other thing that one of the guideposts that Brene specifically talks about that I really like, because I hadn't thought about it in this sense, but it makes a lot of sense to me. And she talks about cultivating creativity, but she uses not doing the comparison game as how you do that. And so I'm just going to read this because I think it's very poignant, and then we'll pull it apart. But cultivating creativity involves letting go of comparisons. So you release the tendency to measure your own creative efforts and outputs against those of others. Comparison can stifle creativity by fostering feelings of inadequacy, self-doubt, or envy, leading us to either abandon our ideas or to mimic what others are doing rather than exploring our unique voice. By letting go of comparison, we create space to experiment, innovate, and express ourselves authentically without the pressure of external validation. So it kind of goes back into, if I'm not looking for external validation, if I'm not too worried about what people are saying or thinking, and I'm not playing that comparison game. And I think there's a lot of power in that, man. And I'd never thought about creativity being cultivated by not comparing, but it makes a lot of sense to me because, yeah, dude, if you do have a lot of self-doubt or senses of inadequacy or envy because you're playing that comparison game, then will you ever find your true voice? Like, a perfect example is you with your writing, right? Like, if you had a bunch of self-doubt, or if you were comparing your writing to everybody else's writing or writers that you really like all the time, you may never go through that entire process, right? We talked about that with Bruce too, right? Like, there's people that he tries to emulate, but he also tried to find his own voice in it all, his own little way of doing things. Um, and I think that can be a huge thing that stifles a lot of people, right? Because they go, oh, well, I could never be that good at X, Y, or Z because look at them, right? Or whatever the case may be. And then you never give yourself the opportunity to even explore that for yourself. Thoughts?
Yeah, and I believe that that's evolutionary, though. I believe that in the beginning of whatever it is that you might be trying to do, and I remember I have memories of like growing up in church and being like 5 or 6, 7 years old, and looking at the guy on the other pew over there, and how he was singing and how he was clapping, and I thought it was cool, and I started doing what he was doing. So, copying other people, especially in the beginning, may not be the worst thing. Especially if you're smart enough and aware enough to use different sources, to go to other sources, to try other things as well. And we talk about this when we talk about, when we talked about flying, and there's 101 ways to do this one thing. Pick the technique that works for you, but that comes down to you talking to people and finding out, hey, Cass, how'd you do this? Hey, Roscoe, how'd you do this? And you find out what works for you. And by definition, I'm looking at the definition of creativity here is the use of the imagination or original ideas, ... Right. So if you're copying other people, if you're comparing yourself to other people, then you're not being original in your thought. Now, in the beginning, you might have to. In the beginning, just to get started and learn the process and learn the formulas and learn the, think about a guy like Brian Greene or Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? These guys are like the top of their field. Sean Carroll is another one. These are astrophysicists and cosmology experts at the top of their field in creative theoretical astrophysics, right? They didn't start that way. They started with Physics 101 and learning E equals MC squared and mass times force equals mass times acceleration. Those basic things that they're copying from workbooks and notebooks and the likes of Stephen Hawking and Einstein and all these other people. And then eventually they got to a point where they assimilated all that information and they started having their own thoughts and they started getting creative because they broke away from that copycat nature and they started embracing their creativity.
Well, yeah, don't take me the wrong way. I'm not saying don't learn from other people. Like, you can learn from other people. We all do. That's part of the natural process of learning any subject. You learn from experts and you read books, or, you go to school and take classes on it. But you don't want to, but that's not the point. The point is not to learn from other people. Learn from other people all the time, man. You can avoid a lot of mistakes in your life by learning from other people. But don't compare yourself. Don't try to compare. Like, if Neil deGrasse Tyson in college was trying to compare himself to Stephen Hawking's, who knows if he would have gotten elevated to the level that he is now? Who knows what that would have done to his own self-esteem, to go, oh, well, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not good enough, or I could never understand things well enough, right? You could use that as a motivator even, to go, yeah, dude, I really look up to this person and I really like to be as successful as them or have as much knowledge as them, and use that as a motivator to move in that direction. But you don't want to play the comparison game or try to copycat.
Well,
because then you're not authentic.
We've talked about this too before. We've talked about exactly that before, where we say that comparison and competition can be great motivators if you frame it correctly. Now, if when I was learning to play my guitar, if I got pissed off because I wasn't as good as Ozzy Osbourne, R.I.P., then I carried around all that shame for it, and I beat myself up for it because I've been playing guitar for, actually, I don't even think Ozzy played guitar. Zakk Wylde played his guitar. If I was comparing myself to those guys and then getting all pissed off and holding myself accountable to that, then it's not doing me any good because I've been playing guitar for 2 weeks and they've been playing for 20 years, right? So it's not the same. But I can reframe that and go, hey man, now I'm motivated to practice this until I get it right, or until I can't get it wrong. Until I play this so many times that I know that opening riff to Sweet Home Alabama like the back of my hand, and I don't care how many years or months I have not picked up that guitar over there, I can pick it up right now and I can play that opening riff because I practiced it so many times, because I was motivated. I wanted to sound good. I wanted to pick up chicks on the front porch of the fraternity house. Let's be honest. Anybody, sidebar, anybody who tells you that they started playing guitar for a reason other than to pick up chicks is fucking lying to you. I don't care if they're 5 years old or 25 years old. They're trying to impress chicks. Sorry.
That's all right. Good sidebar. I would expect no less, Roscoe. Yeah. So anyways, man, yeah, I think that's just a great way to look at it. And, we got to fight that desire to play that comparison game for a bunch of reasons. You talked about the fact that it's the thief of joy, but like we were just talking about, it can also really stymie your own creativity and your ability to find your own authentic voice or purpose or lane. So, anything else on that one?
Well, I'm looking at a list over here.
Yeah. What do you got?
That's interesting. It's interesting though, is so far everything that we've talked about has been on the list, and there's a couple more. Creativity wasn't on there specifically, but there is one on here about inspiring other people, and I think that it can go with this creativity discussion, and I think it'll branch off into something else real quick. But if you're a creative person, if you are one of those people who likes to exercise your own, original ideas and your own original thoughts, then maybe there's somebody else out there who is trying to do that or looking to do that or curious about doing that, and that can inspire them to try. And at the very least, maybe there's some mentorship opportunities that are in there. I also think that it's inspiring to other people when you stand up in front of a room and you say, guys, I fucked up. Here's why I fucked up. And here's how I'm not going to fuck up the next time.
Yeah.
Right. That inspires other people to hold themselves accountable and show a little bit of humility. And there's that humility is a superpower thing where, inspiring other people, this is essentially this leadership. When you boil it down to its simplest form, leadership is going to be inspiring other people to do things because you did something to get them to want to do it. You motivated them in a way. It's not a carrot and stick motivation. That's not the best way to do it. But if you're one of those authentic people, if you have that authenticity about you and you stand up in front of the room and you say, guys, we screwed this up, or I screwed this up. Here's why and how, and here's how we're not going to do it again. Well, that inspires the other people to stand up when they make a mistake. And now we're all learning from each other. It's like, I didn't need all 22 players on my football team to make the same damn mistake. And some of the parents got onto me occasionally for yelling at the kids. And I said, you got to understand, like, I don't want to have to teach this 22 fucking times, right? If a kid messes something up and I go over there and I yell at him, I'm yelling so that the other kids, I mean, yes, I'm trying to elicit a response and grab his 100% undivided attention right now. But I want the other kids to see and hear that and learn from that and go, wow, I don't want to get yelled at by coach, or man, I was about to screw this up too. Right. And now I know how to do it so that when it's their turn to do it, now I don't have to recoach that crap. And instead of teaching it 22 times, maybe I only have to do it 5 times. That saves everybody time. We get to learn more in the process, or in the long run. And you can see how the second, third order effects of just owning it right there at the point of attack can lead to better things down the road easily.
Yeah, well, and I would say too that you can be an inspiration to people too when you do some of this work, right? When you learn how to cultivate authenticity, when you learn how to cultivate resiliency skills, and then you demonstrate that in the work environment or in a social environment, and then people come up to you and they're like, "Hey, dude, how did you do that? Like, how did you overcome that?" Right? And then you can share that with people, right? So there's a whole bunch of ways that you can inspire people, I think, just by doing some of this work. And having the courage over comfort to go out there and get after some of these problems and imperfections. Like the whole point of this podcast today is growth through imperfection, right? And the point is, dude, we're all imperfect. We all have things that we need to maybe address and work on or build skills around a little bit. But that's how you grow, right? You grow by doing those things. When we talk about resiliency, you don't grow by just pushing through and getting to the other side. You grow by going to task on those things that you debrief to yourself need to change. What's the messaging I've had? Why do I keep making the same mistake? What is it the root cause of why I find myself in this pattern or this loop? You figure those things out, man, and then all of a sudden you're not making that mistake anymore, right? And you're improving, you're growing, you're becoming a better person, you're becoming more authentic, you're becoming more well-rounded, and you're building skills for yourself that are going to help you with other challenges that you're going to face in life.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that growth, perfection aside, I think a lot of the growth comes from doing. And you can read books about it all day long, and you can watch YouTube videos about it all day long, but eventually you got to do it. And here's the rub: when you do it, you're going to screw it up, and it doesn't matter what it is, right? Very, very few people are going to go out there and nail it on the first rep. I'd say that those are the one-offs, the statistical outliers, 3 standard deviations away from the norm. The majority of us, all of us in the meaty part of the bell curve, we're going to screw it up a time or two before we get it right. Okay. And that you learn from doing. So eventually you've got to stop doing the analysis paralysis bullshit, and you got to strap your shoes on and go for it. Right.
Yeah.
And when you do, kind of go into it knowing like this may not go the way that I think it's going to go. And I mean, I got some good news today. I'll tell you about this when we get offline, but I got some good news today, and I'm excited. I'm really fired up about it. But I know that when at the end of this event that I'm getting ready to do, I know it's not going to be what I think it is. And I'm starting to coach myself on this about how I'm going to react and how I need to take deep breaths and maybe get a couple of fingers of Belvani to prep for it. But that doesn't,
don't numb, Roscoe. Don't numb.
I have to put Dude, I have to put the step. I have to take the step, right? I have to try, because if I don't, then I'll never know. I'll never learn that lesson. I'll never get the feedback. I'll never be able to debrief the event if I don't do the event. Does that make sense? So you have to learn. You have to do eventually.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, there's a great old Chinese proverb that says something to the effect of like, the person who blames everybody else has a long way to go on their journey. The person who blames themselves is about halfway there, and the person that doesn't blame anybody has finally arrived, right? And the point in that is you can blame whoever you want. You can be hard on yourself as much as you want until you just let go of some of that bullshit and just go to task and recognize that some of this work may be really difficult, right? If you're not a very introspective person, if you've never taken the time to really be self-reflective, like that's a practice that can be difficult to build, and then when you start to realize that there's certain things about yourself that you want to change, that change is going to be difficult, right? Change is never easy in certain respects, whether that's physical, emotional, mental, whatever it is, right? But you can do it. But you have to take the steps to do it. And you're, like you said, man, you're going to struggle along the way. You're going to have good days and bad days. You're going to do it right sometimes, and you're going to fuck it away some other times too. But that's not the point. The point is the process, right? It's like we talk about all the time. It's not the outcome. It's going through that process and learning those things about yourself, building some skills for yourself that are going to make you more well-rounded, more resilient, more capable of dealing with whatever challenges come down the road in the future for you.
Yeah, and I was just looking up over here the difference between assigning blame and finding a reason. And when you're trying to find the reason that something happened, this goes back to your Chinese proverb. That's what sparked my curiosity on this. When you're trying to find the reason that something happened, you're just looking for the accountability piece of it. You're looking for, why did this go wrong? Where's the root cause here, so that maybe we can fix something or tweak or go a different direction or maybe try something different next time. Why did I bonk at mile 10 on my half marathon? Well, maybe my fueling was bad. Maybe I didn't lace my shoes tight enough. Maybe, I didn't poop before I ran, or whatever it is. You find that root cause and you fix it next time. Versus assigning blame is you're looking for fault. You're looking to assign fault to somebody, and it could be yourself. It could be something outside of your control. It could be someone else. But I think it comes down to the tone and the way you communicate those things. Oftentimes when I'm doing something and it gets screwed up, oftentimes that comes back onto me and something that I did. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to blame myself and assign that fault. I'm going to look inside and see, well, what was inside of my control that I could change next time to do something a little bit different. If you're going out on your half marathon and you didn't make the time that you wanted to, but the reason that you didn't is because you had a 15 knot headwind the entire time. Well, you know what? In the next training cycle, I'm going to run into the wind more, and I'm going to train myself for that so that I can, figure out ways to mitigate.
Well, yeah. And there could be all kinds of reasons why you don't, that are outside of your control too, right? Like, if to use your marathon example, you start off and you get tripped up and you fall down and you bang up your knee, and now your knee hurts for the whole run and you can't hold your pace. And like, there's all kinds of different reasons as to why maybe you don't perform to the level that you wanted to on any given day. But again, that goes back to the self-compassion piece, and then just recognizing those things and then going back to task like we talk about all the time, man. Okay, here's what went right. Here's what went wrong. How do I fix what happened and what went wrong? How do I mitigate those contingencies for the next time? And then boom, press and move on, move out, right? You got to shed some of that off and just go.
Yeah. Get out there and get after it, man. What else you got from Brene Brown?
Oh, she's got a bunch more, but we can save them for another episode. We don't have enough time to get through the rest of them, and some of them are, I don't think, as
part.
Well, I mean, they're good, but I don't think they're they're not as aligned with what we're specifically focused on talking about right now. So, although there is a good one for you that I'll talk about offline.
Yeah, there's another good book out there that I'd encourage the readers to pick up, and it's Mel Robbins' new book called Let Them. And it essentially says, oh, they want to judge you? Well, let them. They want to pick on you? Let them. They want to criticize you for making life changes and do whatever? Then let them. Who cares? That's essentially the one-liner for the book, is let them do what they want to do, because you know what?
Yeah.
This all comes back down to you and the individual. And I've said this a time or two. I know I've talked about it on the show. I've talked about it with you personally. I've talked about it with my wife. Be like, look, I'm going this way, and you guys can get on board and you can come with me. You can cheer me on, or you can stay where you're at. I really don't care, but that's where I'm going. And you know what? I think oftentimes, you find out who your real friends are, for one, and for two, most people join in and they're like, cool, man, let's go.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's very poignant, Roscoe, because at the end of the day, it's not about anybody else but you. And I don't mean that in a selfish way, but when you go to task on these things, it's about making you the person you want to be. So don't worry about like I've said this so many times on the podcast, man. If you're not in the arena with me, then fuck you. I really don't care what you think, what your thoughts are on the subject, how you feel about it. I could care less, right? If you're not in the arena doing the work, getting dirty, getting bloodied, getting beat up, failing, trying to win, doing the work, then I really don't, whatever you have to say has no impact on me. So, and it's not about other people. It's about what you want for you. It's about the person that you want to be. It's about you walking into and cultivating your own skills and your own authentic self. That's all it's about. And you can't worry about the folks in the stands that are throwing tomatoes and using harsh language at you. So
those things hurt, though, man. Have you ever been hit with a tomato?
No.
Well, I haven't either, but I imagine that fucking hurts, man. Some of those tomatoes, those big, thick slicing tomatoes, those things are firm, man. They're like a little softball.
They are pretty big. Those big old steak tomatoes.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Hell yeah, man. Good shit, dude. What else you got?
Yeah. That's all I got for today, brother.
All right, man. Be the change.
Be the one.
Thanks for flying with the Be One Change One podcast. If you got something out of this show, then be the one and share it in your circles of influence.
You can be our wingman through our website at www.be1change1.com. That's B and the number 1, change and the number 1.com.
We invite you to be the one and join our fighter squadron on social media at Be1Change1 on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can follow us at Paul Roscoe White on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Roscoe's website, www.paulroscoewhite.com.
You can email us from the website and please leave comments, share, and ask questions, or leave ideas of things you would like to discuss on future podcasts. Most importantly, be the one that helps us win the algorithm by leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Thanks for joining. Until next time, be the one.